Cops attack the wrong black girl, thinking she's just another easy target. But what they don't know is, she's the most ruthless fighter they've ever faced. Trained, focused, and hiding a secret that no one could have seen coming. This girl wasn't running from anything. She was waiting. And when she finally speaks, what she reveals will turn their entire world upside down. Who trained her? Why was she really targeted? And what happens when the system realizes it messed with the wrong one? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The streetlights flickered to life one by one as Kai walked down Marshall Avenue, her footsteps quiet against the cracked sidewalk. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, casting long shadows between the weathered buildings. Her dark hood was pulled up and white earbuds dangled from her ears, though no music played. She preferred to hear everything around her. The evening air carried the usual symphony of city sounds, car horns honking in the distance, the rumble of the elevated train 2 blocks over, and snippets of loud conversations from open windows. A group of kids played basketball in a fenced court nearby, their laughter and shouts echoing off brick walls. Kai allowed herself a small smile, thinking of Malik. The 10-year-old had finally mastered his multiplication tables today after weeks of practice. His face had lit up when he got all the answers right, and for a moment, Kai had felt something warm inside her chest. Pride, maybe, or something close to it. She kept her eyes down as she passed Mr. Chen's grocery store, its windows protected by metal grates. The smell of cooking oil and spices drifted from the takeout place next door, mixing with the less pleasant scent of overflowing garbage bins in the alley. A group of teenagers lounged on the steps of an apartment building, but Kai didn't look their way. Eye contact invited interaction, and interaction invited complications. The graffiti-covered walls told stories of territory and tribulation, gang tags mixed with elaborate murals of fallen community members. Kai knew every mark, every change. Her mind cataloged them automatically, the way it recorded everything. The new crack in the sidewalk by the bus stop, the missing letter in the pharmacy sign, the fresh boards on Old Man Johnson's window. As she approached the corner store on 23rd Street, blue and red lights suddenly painted the buildings in alternating colors. The reflection caught her eye first, dancing across the dusty window of the laundromat across the street. A small crowd had gathered near the corner store's entrance, where shattered glass glittered on the concrete like fallen stars. Yellow police tape fluttered in the evening breeze as an officer stretched it between 2 poles. Kai didn't break her stride. Her breathing remained steady, her pace unchanged. But her muscles tensed slightly, ready to move at a moment's notice. An instinct drilled into her through years of training she tried not to think about. The low rumble of an engine approached from behind. A patrol car crept alongside her, matching her pace. Kai's fingers twitched, but she kept walking, her movements measured and calm. The car's tires crunched over broken glass as it pulled ahead and stopped. 3 officers stepped out, their badges catching the last rays of sunlight. "Hey you," the tallest one called out, his hand resting casually on his belt. "Hold up a minute." Kai stopped, her face a mask of careful neutrality. The officers spread out slightly, positioning themselves in a loose triangle around her. Their body language screamed aggression poorly disguised as authority. "There was a robbery at that store back there," the second officer said, gesturing with his thumb. "You seem to be in an awful hurry to leave the area." Kai remained silent, her eyes fixed on a point in the middle distance. She noticed everything. The way the first officer's hand kept twitching toward his weapon, the fresh coffee stain on the second officer's uniform, the slight limp in the third officer's step. "We're going to need to see some ID," the third officer demanded, taking a step closer. "And take those earbuds out when we're talking to you." The first officer moved forward, reaching for her arm. "Put your hands behind your back until we sort this out." What happened next was pure instinct, movements programmed into her muscles through endless repetition. As the officer's hand made contact with her arm, Kai shifted her weight slightly. A simple pivot of her shoulder and his grip slipped away like water. The second officer lunged forward, but Kai was already moving, flowing around him like smoke. His momentum carried him forward, and he stumbled into his colleague. The third officer's eyes widened in surprise as Kai slipped past him, her movements precise and efficient. No wasted energy, no aggressive gestures, just empty space where she had been. "Hey!" one of them shouted, but Kai was already running, her feet carrying her silently down the nearest alley. Behind her, she heard the chaos of their pursuit. Heavy footsteps, crackling radios, breathless curses. The alley was a maze of shadows and obstacles. Dumpsters, wooden pallets, scattered trash. But Kai navigated it without hesitation. She vaulted over a chain-link fence, rolled to absorb the impact, and kept moving. Her heart beat steady in her chest, neither racing nor slowing. Above her, a security camera mounted on the corner of a building tracked her movement, its red light blinking steadily. Its grainy lens captured a blurred image, a hooded figure turning the corner at the end of the alley, melting into the darkness beyond. The timestamp in the corner of the frame read, 8:47 p.m. By morning, that same footage would be playing on every local news channel. Analysts freeze-framing the mysterious figure who had evaded 3 police officers without throwing a single punch. But for now, the night swallowed Kai whole, leaving only questions in her wake. Through the cracked window of the abandoned apartment, morning light filtered in, casting long shadows across the bare wooden floor. Kai sat cross-legged on a worn sleeping bag, her attention fixed on a small portable TV she'd salvaged weeks ago. The ancient antenna, wrapped in aluminum foil, picked up just enough signal to show the local news. Her own image flickered across the screen, a grainy, hooded figure captured in black and white. The headline below read, "Violent runaway assaults officers during robbery escape." Kai's expression remained neutral as she watched, though her fingers tightened slightly around the notebook in her lap. The suspect, believed to be connected to last night's convenience store robbery, displayed unusual combat skills when confronted by law enforcement, the anchor reported, her perfectly styled hair gleaming under studio lights. Police described the encounter as highly aggressive. The footage played again, zooming in on Kai's hoodie. Technical analysts pointed to blur patterns and movement signatures, their cursors circling areas of interest while they spouted terms like enhanced imagery and digital reconstruction. "Our forensics team attempted facial recognition," a police spokesperson explained, his badge catching the camera lights. But the quality of the footage combined with the suspect's evasive movements made identification impossible. Kai's hand moved mechanically across the page of her notebook, recording times, names, and statements in precise handwriting. She drew small symbols next to certain words, circles, squares, and triangles arranged in patterns that would mean nothing to anyone else. The morning news coverage sparked immediate reactions across the city. Online forums exploded with speculation. Kai watched it all unfold on her salvaged laptop, connected to borrowed Wi-Fi from the cafe 3 floors below. "Has to be gang-related," one commenter wrote. "They're recruiting younger and younger these days." "Did you see those moves? Military training for sure, probably some foreign operative." The comments grew increasingly hostile, filled with thinly veiled racism and assumptions about her neighborhood. Kai recorded these too, her symbols growing more complex as she mapped the spread of misinformation. At the 12th precinct, fluorescent lights hummed overhead as officers gathered for their morning briefing. The 3 officers involved in last night's incident stood at the front of the room, their uniforms pressed and badges shining. "The suspect was aggressive from the start," Officer Martinez insisted, his partner nodding in agreement. "Refused to comply with basic commands." Detective Cole stood at the back of the room, his weathered face creased in concentration as he watched the footage again. Unlike his colleagues, he saw something different in those fluid movements. "That's not street fighting," he interrupted, causing heads to turn. "Look at the precision, the economy of motion. She had training, professional training." The room fell quiet. Cole stepped forward, pointing to the screen. "No wasted movement. No aggressive gestures. This isn't some kid who learned to fight in juvie. This is something else." Internal Affairs received the footage an hour later. A junior analyst flagged it for review, noting the discrepancy between the officer's report and the video evidence. The file was marked "pending investigation" and quietly filed away in the system. Meanwhile, in her makeshift home, Kai continued her work. The apartment's previous occupants had left behind a desk, which she'd positioned near the window. Papers covered its surface, each filled with her precise notes and mysterious symbols. A police scanner muttered quietly in the corner, its electronic voice mixing with the sounds of the city below. She moved with the same fluid grace as in the footage, but here, in her private space, there was an additional layer of purpose to her movements. She wasn't running now. She was planning. Each note she made, each pattern she recorded, was another piece of a larger puzzle. The morning sun climbed higher, warming the room. Kai removed her hoodie, revealing close-cropped dark hair and sharp features. Her eyes moved constantly, taking in everything. The position of the sun, the patterns of foot traffic below, the timing of police patrols. Everything was data. Everything could be useful. Across town, in a government building with peeling paint and flickering lights, Trina Ross sat at her desk, drowning in case files. 20 years as a social worker had taught her to see patterns in chaos, to find connections others missed. When her supervisor, Mr. Davidson, appeared at her door, she knew something was wrong. "We need your help with an identification," he said, dropping a file on her desk. "Unknown youth, possible runaway. Made quite a scene last night." Trina opened the file and the now familiar footage played on her tablet. She watched the hooded figure move through the alley, something nagging at the back of her mind. The movement, the precision. It sparked a memory she couldn't quite grasp. "Why me?" she asked, looking up at Davidson. "This seems more like a police matter." "Because you know this neighborhood, Trina. You know these kids. And frankly, we need someone with your sensitivity to handle this properly." Trina understood the unspoken message. They wanted someone who could navigate the racial and social implications without causing more trouble. Someone who could make this go away quietly. She watched the footage again, that sense of familiarity growing stronger. Something about the way the figure moved, the way they avoided contact rather than confronted it. She'd seen something like this before years ago, but where? "I'll take it," she said finally, her voice heavy with reluctance. "But I want full access to the juvenile records, including sealed files." Davidson nodded, already heading for the door. "Whatever you need, just find this kid before things escalate." Trina sat back in her chair, the file open before her. On her screen, the mysterious figure turned that corner again and again, disappearing into the darkness. Something about this case pulled at her, like a loose thread she couldn't help but want to unravel. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Trina sat at her desk, her eyes fixed on the ancient computer monitor. The department's digital terminal was slow and outdated, but it held decades of records, a digital maze of lost children and broken families. She rubbed her tired eyes, taking another sip of cold coffee as she clicked through juvenile records and archived foster files. Something about that security footage kept nagging at her. The way the figure moved, the calculated precision. It felt familiar in a way that made her stomach twist. She started with recent missing child reports, then worked backward through the years. The search interface was clunky, full of drop-down menus and Boolean operators that made her head hurt. But Trina had spent 20 years learning its quirks. Her fingers moved automatically, typing in parameters and cross-referencing dates. A file from 8 years ago caught her attention. Kai L. The name was simple, almost too simple. Trina clicked it open, and her breath caught. The girl's intake photo showed dark eyes that seemed to look right through the camera, sharp, guarded eyes that Trina remembered clearly. She'd been 6 years old at intake, listed as an emergency placement after her grandmother's death. But the file ended abruptly 6 months later. No adoption, no permanent placement, just a single line. Transferred to federal care. No contact information. No follow-up notes. No indication of where the child had gone. "That's not right," Trina muttered, scrolling through the sparse documentation. Federal transfers were rare, usually reserved for witness protection or extreme circumstances, and they always had extensive paperwork. She opened another window and started a broader search. Something about that missing paperwork bothered her. She pulled files of other girls from the same time period, focusing on cases with similar patterns. The results made her sit up straighter. Another case, 3 months before Kai's, Jasmine M., age 7, showed exceptional athletic ability, listed as a behavioral risk due to aggressive responses to authority. File ended with transferred to federal care. Another one 6 months later, Denise W., age 8. Advanced cognitive development, flagged for non-compliant behavior. Same federal transfer note. Trina's hands shook slightly as she created a spreadsheet. More cases emerged. Maya T., Angela R., Kendra B. All black girls. All noted for being exceptionally smart, athletic, or resistant to authority. All disappearing into the vague realm of federal care. 27 cases over 15 years. 27 girls who vanished from the system without a trace. The office had grown quiet around her, most workers gone for the day. Trina checked her watch. 6:45 p.m. She needed more information, but not from these sanitized files. She drove to the Morton housing complex where Malik lived with his mother. The evening air was thick with humidity, and children played in the fading light between the buildings. Trina had known Malik's mother, Shanice, for years through various community programs. "Miss Ross." Shanice's smile was warm as she opened the door. "What brings you by so late?" "Just checking in," Trina said, accepting the offered glass of iced tea. "Been hearing about some new kids in the neighborhood. Wanted to make sure everyone's getting the support they need." They sat in Shanice's small but immaculate living room, making small talk about the community center and school programs. Malik sat at the kitchen table, working on what looked like math homework. "Actually," Trina said carefully, "I heard there might be some new tutors at the center. Any quiet kids, maybe keeping to themselves?" Malik looked up from his homework. "You mean like Kai? She's really good at math. Shows me all these cool tricks for remembering stuff." Shanice nodded. "Sweet girl. Very polite. Been helping Malik with his studies for a few months now." "Haven't seen her lately, though," Malik added, his face falling slightly. "Not since that thing with the police happened." Trina kept her expression neutral, though her heart rate picked up. "Police thing?" "Some trouble at the corner store," Shanice said, shaking her head. "Police always making assumptions about our kids. Haven't seen her since then. Poor thing probably got scared off." After making her goodbyes, Trina sat in her car for a long moment. The pieces were coming together, forming a picture she didn't want to see. She drove back to the office, the streets empty and dark. The fluorescent lights hummed to life as she entered her office. She pulled out a fresh legal pad and began writing names. 27 girls, 27 lives interrupted. She arranged them chronologically, noting patterns in their ages, their reported behaviors, their last known locations. Kai's file drew her attention again. The intake photo was missing now, probably deleted from the system. But Trina's memory was crystal clear. Those eyes, that careful measuring look. She'd seen it 8 years ago in a scared 6-year-old, and she'd seen it again in that security footage. Her hand shook slightly as she pulled a USB drive from her desk drawer. What she was about to do could cost her her job, maybe worse. But 27 girls had vanished on her watch. 27 children had been erased with a simple bureaucratic note. The copy function moved slowly, files transferring one by one. Trina watched the progress bar inch forward, her heart pounding. In the empty office, the soft whir of her computer felt deafening. She checked the door again, making sure the hallway was dark and empty. Then she began copying everything she could find. Intake forms, psychological evaluations, medical records, school reports. Every scrap of evidence that these girls had existed before they vanished into the system. The USB drive filled steadily with data, each file a piece of a puzzle she was only beginning to understand. Outside her window, the city lights twinkled like distant stars, and somewhere out there, a girl who had once been in her care was watching, waiting and planning. The morning sun cast long shadows across the street as Kai adjusted her borrowed delivery uniform. The cap sat low on her face, hiding her features as she watched Detective Cole's familiar figure enter the Corner Cup Cafe across the street. She stood near a newspaper stand, pretending to check her phone while making careful observations. Cole ordered the same thing every morning: black coffee, 2 sugars, and a plain bagel. He always sat at the window seat, scanning the morning paper while picking at his breakfast. His movements were methodical, almost mechanical, a man who found comfort in routine. Kai's small black notebook was nearly full of these details. Time of arrival, 7:45 a.m. Duration, 32 minutes. Exit route, always south on Mason Street. She recorded everything with precise, neat handwriting. The detective's schedule was a puzzle she was slowly piecing together, one morning at a time. He looked tired today, dark circles under his eyes visible even from across the street. His tie was slightly crooked, and his shoes needed polishing. Small details that told their own story. The case was wearing on him. As she watched, memories flickered through her mind like old film reels. The sterile white room materialized around her, Ward 9's training facility. The walls had been bare except for a single mirror, which she later learned was two-way glass. The floor had been cold under her feet during morning exercises. "Erasure is safety," the instructors had repeated day after day. Their voices echoed in her head now, clinical and detached. "Your past is a liability. Your identity is a weakness. Erasure is safety." She had been 8 years old when Cole visited. She remembered standing in line with the other girls, all of them in identical gray uniforms. The adults had called it Observation Week. Cole had worn a different suit then, but his posture was the same, rigid, official. He'd walked down the line with a clipboard, making notes. He hadn't looked directly at any of them. Maybe that had made it easier for him to sign whatever papers they'd put in front of him, to authorize whatever came next. The memory dissolved as Cole stood to leave the cafe. Kai waited until he was out of sight before moving. Her next stop was the public library, 6 blocks east. The library was quiet at this hour, mostly empty except for a few elderly patrons and students. Kai chose a computer in the back corner, where she could see all approaches while remaining partially hidden behind a bookshelf. Her fingers moved quickly over the keyboard as she accessed the public records database. Ward 9 yielded nothing as expected, but when she entered the coordinates, numbers burned into her memory through years of planning, a result appeared. The screen showed a satellite view of a sprawling compound in rural Georgia. The official designation read, Decommissioned FEMA Emergency Response Center, Classified. She studied the image carefully. The layout matched her memories. 3 main buildings arranged in a triangle, a central courtyard, high walls. But the satellite photo was old, at least 5 years out of date. More recent images were mysteriously absent from the database. After wiping her browser history, Kai left the library and took a circuitous route back to her temporary home. The abandoned apartment was bare except for a sleeping bag, a few changes of clothes, and an old laptop she'd salvaged and repaired. She kept nothing personal, nothing that could identify her. Kneeling on the dusty floor, she pried up a loose board near the wall. Inside the small cavity was a waterproof pouch containing her most precious possessions. Documents she'd managed to save over the years, photographs partially destroyed but still legible, and a small hard drive marked W9 Mirror. The drive was her proof, her insurance policy, and her weapon all in one. She'd stolen it during the chaos of her escape, knowing it might be her only chance to expose the truth. Kai connected the drive to her laptop and began the complex unlocking sequence. It wasn't a simple password. It was a series of muscle memory patterns, movements that only someone who'd been through Ward 9's training would know. Her fingers tapped out the rhythm automatically. Tap, tap, pause, tap, slide, tap. The screen filled with files. Medical records detailing enhancement procedures. Training logs recording progress in combat, evasion, and psychological conditioning. Psychological evaluations discussing subject compliance and identity suppression techniques. She found her own file labeled only with a number, WD9-2184. The clinical language described her as highly adaptable and exceptional retention capabilities. There were notes about her resistance to emotional manipulation being both an asset and a concern, but it was Cole's signature that caught her eye. It appeared on multiple documents, authorizing transfers and procedures. He'd been more than just an observer. He'd been part of the machine that had erased them. Cole, she whispered, the name falling from her lips like a stone. The man who sat in the cafe every morning, reading his paper and drinking his coffee, had helped build the walls of her prison. His signature had sealed her fate and the fates of countless others. The files continued scrolling across her screen. More girls, more numbers, more lives reduced to clinical observations and test results. Each file was a story of erasure, of identity stripped away and replaced with programming. Each signature was another link in the chain of responsibility. In the growing darkness of the empty apartment, Kai sat surrounded by the digital ghosts of Ward 9. The blue light from the screen illuminated her face as she whispered that single name again. Cole. The morning rush had barely begun at the Cornerstone coffee shop when Trina slid into a booth across from Liam. She'd chosen this spot carefully, far from the counter, away from the windows, where their conversation wouldn't carry. Liam was already there, his hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee, his tie slightly crooked as usual. "Thanks for meeting me early," Trina said, keeping her voice low. She pulled a folded paper from her bag and smoothed it on the table between them. "I need you to look at this." Liam adjusted his glasses and leaned forward. His eyes moved down the list of names, dates, and case numbers. Each line represented a girl, all between ages 8 and 14, all marked as transferred to federal care with no follow-up documentation. 27 cases, Trina said, tapping the paper. All black girls, all tagged as behavioral risks just before they vanished from the system. Liam sat back, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Foster care records are always messy, Trina. Kids get moved around, paperwork gets lost, files get misplaced. You know how it is." "Look at the pattern," Trina insisted, pulling out another sheet. "Every single one of these girls was flagged for unusual behavior first. This one," she pointed to a name, "tagged for excessive physical capability. This one, advanced cognitive development. Another for unusual emotional control. Then poof, they're gone. No trace." The morning light filtered through the cafe's windows, casting long shadows across their table. A barista called out someone's order, the espresso machine hissing in the background. Liam picked up the list again, his forehead creasing. "And you're sure about the racial pattern?" "I checked every transfer to federal care in the past 15 years. White girls, Hispanic girls, Asian girls. They all have proper documentation, follow-up reports, contact information. But these 27? Nothing, they just disappeared. This is..." Liam trailed off, shaking his head. "This is big, Trina. Maybe too big." "I know." She wrapped her hands around her untouched coffee cup. "But I can't ignore it. Not anymore." "Have you talked to anyone else about this?" "That's my next stop. Margaret Chen, she was a caseworker back then. Handled one of these cases personally. She's retired now, but maybe she remembers something." Liam carefully folded the list and handed it back. "Be careful, Trina. If what you're suggesting is true..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The drive to Margaret Chen's house took Trina through quiet suburban streets lined with well-kept gardens. The retired caseworker lived in a small blue house with white trim and a neat row of tulips along the front walk. Margaret answered the door wearing a cardigan and a puzzled expression. "Trina Ross? This is unexpected." "I'm sorry to drop by unannounced, Mrs. Chen. I need to ask you about a case from 10 years ago. Jasmine Taylor." The older woman's face changed subtly. "Come in," she said, stepping back from the door. Inside, Margaret's living room was filled with family photos and potted plants. She settled into an armchair, gesturing for Trina to take the sofa. "Jasmine," Margaret said slowly. "I haven't thought about that case in years. Such a bright girl. Talented dancer." "What happened to her?" Trina asked gently. Margaret's fingers worried at the edge of her cardigan. "It was strange. A man came to the office, plain clothes, not a uniform. Said he was from a federal program for gifted youth. Showed ID, but I never got a good look at it. He had papers for an immediate transfer." "Was that normal procedure?" No. Margaret's voice dropped. Nothing about it was normal. He took her that same day. No warning, no preparation. When I tried to follow up, my supervisor told me to drop it. Said it was classified, above my clearance level. Did you ever hear from Jasmine again? Never. Margaret looked out her window at the neat suburban street. I requested updates for months, nothing. Eventually, I was told to forget about it, to focus on my other cases. She turned back to Trina. Why are you asking about this now? Because Jasmine wasn't the only one, Trina said. There were others. Many others. Margaret's face paled slightly. I always wondered. There were rumors, you know. Other workers talking about similar cases, but we never discussed it openly. Did the man who took Jasmine mention where she was going? No specifics, just said it was a special program for exceptional youth. But something felt wrong. The way Jasmine looked when they left, like she knew something I didn't. Like she was afraid, but trying not to show it. Trina left Margaret's house with her mind racing. The retired caseworker's account confirmed her suspicions. This wasn't just bureaucratic confusion or lost paperwork. This was systematic, intentional. That evening, Trina sat at her kitchen table reviewing her notes. Her son Marcus was upstairs doing homework. The house quiet, except for the occasional creak of floorboards above. The list of 27 names was pinned to her refrigerator with a magnet, a silent testimony to lives interrupted. Her laptop chimed with a new email notification. The sender's address was a string of random numbers and letters. The subject line was blank. Trina clicked it open. 3 words appeared. Stop digging. You're not cleared for this case. Her heart began to pound, but it was the attachment that made her blood run cold. A photo, clearly taken that morning. Marcus walking to school, backpack over his shoulder, completely unaware he was being watched. The laptop screen blurred as tears filled her eyes. Her hands shook as she pushed back from the table, nearly knocking over her chair in her rush to the stairs. Marcus? She called out, trying to keep her voice steady. Yeah, Mom? His response from his room was immediate, normal, safe. Trina leaned against the wall, her legs weak with relief. She could hear him moving around upstairs, the familiar sound of his footsteps crossing his room. Back in the kitchen, the list on her refrigerator seemed to stare back at her. 27 names, 27 girls, 27 families who never got answers. Her son's face in that photo burned in her mind. The message was clear. Back off, or else. But as she stood there, looking at those names, Trina felt something harden inside her. Fear, yes, but also determination. The fluorescent lights of the public library hummed overhead as Kai sat at a computer terminal in the far corner, her back to the wall. Her fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard, searching through databases of local shelters and mental health facilities. She'd been at it for hours, methodically working through lists of names and locations. A familiar face flickered across her screen. Maya D., age 15. Kai's breath caught slightly. The intake record was from St. Elmo's Shelter for Girls, dated 6 months ago. She studied the photo carefully. Maya's dark eyes were vacant, her expression dulled. Nothing like the sharp, observant girl Kai remembered from Ward 9. The file painted a familiar pattern. No family contacts, no school records, significant trauma indicators. Notes from the intake counselor mentioned difficulty with verbal communication and possible dissociative episodes. At the bottom, current medication regime, Thorazine, Haldol, Prozac. Kai's jaw tightened. She knew what those medications meant: chemical restraints, memory suppressants. The same tools Ward 9 had used, just in different hands. She sent the file to the ancient printer in the corner, then carefully erased her search history. As she retrieved the warm papers, she noticed her hands were steady. They were always steady now, even when her mind was racing. The next morning, Kai approached St. Elmo's wearing khakis and a polo shirt, carrying a canvas bag with art supplies. She'd created a simple backstory. Sarah Chen, first-time volunteer, interested in art therapy. The shelter was an old brick building with barred windows and a small courtyard surrounded by chain-link fence. We're always grateful for volunteers, the front desk worker said, barely glancing at Kai's forged ID. The girls are in the common room for afternoon activities. The common room smelled of industrial cleaner and old carpet. About 15 girls sat at various tables, some doing puzzles, others just staring into space. Kai scanned the room carefully, her trained eyes taking in every detail. Maya sat alone by a window, her long frame hunched over a piece of paper. She was taller than Kai remembered, but thinner, her movements slow and uncertain as she drew repetitive patterns with a stubby pencil. Kai approached slowly, setting her bag down at Maya's table. "Mind if I join you?" Maya didn't look up, but her pencil stopped moving. Kai noticed the pattern she'd been drawing, geometric shapes that looked random but weren't. They were Ward 9 navigation codes, probably drawn unconsciously. "I brought some new art supplies," Kai said softly, pulling out colored pencils and paper. "Thought we could draw together." Maya's eyes flickered up briefly, then back down. There was a flash of recognition, quick, uncertain, before it faded behind the medication's haze. "You like patterns," Kai continued, keeping her voice gentle. She began drawing her own pattern, matching Maya's rhythm. Left, right, angle, curve. The old training sequence they'd learned together. Maya's hand trembled slightly. She watched Kai's drawing with growing focus, her breathing changing subtly. Carefully, Kai slid a photo onto the table between them. It showed two young girls in white rooms, practicing forms. Their faces were partly obscured, but Maya's distinctive height made her identifiable. Kai had kept this photo hidden for years, one of the few pieces of evidence she had. Maya's fingers touched the photo's edge. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. "I remember." The words came out slurred, fighting through the medication. "The white rooms." "Yes," Kai said quietly. "We were there together." Maya's eyes filled with tears, but her expression remained flat, the drugs dampening even this emotional response. She tried to say more, but the words wouldn't come. A shadow fell across their table. "Excuse me," a sharp voice said. Kai turned to see a shelter worker in a blue uniform, her face suspicious. "I need to see your volunteer credentials." "Of course," Kai said calmly, reaching for her bag. "I have them right." "I've already checked the schedule," the worker cut in. "We don't have any new volunteers listed for today." Kai noticed two security guards entering the common room. She'd stayed too long, gotten too involved. Amateur mistake. "My supervisor must have forgotten to update the list," Kai said, standing slowly. "I can call her." "Please remain here while security checks your ID," the worker said firmly. Kai was already moving, her body responding to years of training. She slipped past the worker with fluid precision, ducking under a guard's reaching arm. Maya watched silently, her hand still on the photo. Kai moved through the hallway quickly but calmly, not running. Running attracted attention. She pushed through the front doors just as alarms began to sound. The desk worker stood up in surprise, but Kai was already past her, out into the bright afternoon sun. Later, in the safety of her temporary room, Kai opened her notebook to a fresh page. Under Maya D, she wrote, "Still affected, possible asset." The girl's fragmented memory and medicated state made her vulnerable, but her subconscious still held valuable information. Those navigation patterns proved it. Kai flipped to another page marked targets and underlined a name. Zana. Another Ward 9 survivor, one who might be more cognitively intact. Finding her would be harder. She'd been moved through multiple facilities after her escape attempt, but Kai had learned patience. She closed the notebook and moved to the window, scanning the street below. A dark sedan was parked across the way, its windows tinted. As she watched, a camera lens glinted briefly from inside the car. Someone was taking photos. Kai didn't react, didn't change her position. She simply observed, memorizing details. Make, model, a small dent in the rear fender. Information that might prove useful later. Detective Cole leaned closer to his computer screen, his coffee growing cold beside him as he studied the security footage for the 100th time. The precinct was quiet this late. Most desks empty except for the soft glow of screensavers and emergency lights. He clicked through the frames one by one, watching the hooded figure, this mysterious girl, move through the confrontation with his officers. Each motion was precise, almost choreographed. No wasted energy, no panic. Just pure efficiency. "This isn't right," he muttered, rubbing his tired eyes. Street kids ran on instinct and adrenaline. They scrambled, they fought messily. But this girl, she moved like a trained operative. Each dodge and counter movement spoke of years of practice. Cole opened his email, scrolling back through years of assignments and transfers. Something about her movements triggered an old memory, a case, or maybe a training session. He couldn't quite place it. A subject line caught his eye. Ward 9 Liaison Division, Quarterly Review. The email was from 8 years ago, marked as routine departmental correspondence. Cole clicked it open, scanning the bureaucratic language about youth assessment protocols and behavioral intervention strategies. His stomach tightened as he read further. The details were vague, carefully worded to say nothing specific. But there was something about the tone, the clinical distance of it, that made him uncomfortable. "Ward 9, he said softly, testing the words. Why did that name feel important? The next morning, Cole drove to the Internal Affairs building where his old partner now worked. Sergeant Whitaker's office was on the 3rd floor, all polished wood and certificates on the walls. Very different from their old days working juvenile cases together. "Cole," Whitaker said, not looking up from his computer. "This is unexpected." His voice was neutral, professional, nothing like the eager young cop Cole had known. "Need your insight on something, Jim." Cole sat down uninvited, pulling out his tablet. "Remember that incident last week? The girl who evaded arrest? The robbery suspect?" Whitaker's fingers stopped typing. "What about her?" "I've been reviewing the footage." Cole pulled up the video. "Watch her movements here and here." He pointed to specific frames. "This isn't street fighting. This is advanced evasion training." Whitaker's face remained impassive, but Cole noticed his jaw tighten slightly. "You're obsessing over nothing. Some kids pick up martial arts, watch too many movies." "I found an old email," Cole pressed on, "about Ward 9. We were both on the liaison team, remember? Something about youth assessments." "Ward 9 was dissolved years ago." Whitaker cut him off sharply. "It was a failed juvenile intervention program. Nothing more." "Then why can't I find any records of it? No facility address, no program details?" "Because it failed," Whitaker said, standing up. "Listen to yourself, Cole. You're spinning conspiracy theories over some little hood girl who got lucky dodging a few cops. Drop it." Cole studied his old partner's face, the dismissive tone, the subtle warning in his voice. Whitaker knew something he wasn't saying. "Yeah, maybe you're right," Cole said carefully, gathering his things. "Sorry to waste your time." "Get some sleep," Whitaker called after him. "You look tired." Cole walked home that evening, his mind churning over Whitaker's reaction. The streets were quiet, most shops closed. A cool breeze carried the smell of approaching rain. Something made him pause, a prickling sensation on the back of his neck, the feeling of being watched. He turned slowly, scanning the empty sidewalk behind him. Nothing moved except scattered leaves in the wind. The streetlights cast long shadows between parked cars and closed storefronts. Cole waited, listening, but the street remained still. He turned down Madison Avenue, deliberately taking a different route than usual. The feeling persisted. Every few steps, he checked reflections in windows, glimpsed behind him in car mirrors. But he never caught sight of anyone following. Across the street, hidden in the deep shadow of an old warehouse doorway, Kai stood motionless. Her camera made no sound as she photographed Cole's cautious movements. She'd been tracking him for days now, learning his patterns, watching his growing unease. The camera's display showed clear shots of his face, the worry lines around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. She needed to know if he remembered Ward 9, if he had been part of what happened to her and the others. His conversation with Whitaker played through the wireless earbud in her right ear, captured by the bug she'd planted in Cole's phone 2 days ago. She heard Whitaker's dismissive tone again. Ward 9 was dissolved years ago. Back in her safe house, a forgotten apartment above an abandoned restaurant, Kai sat cross-legged on a bare mattress, replaying the audio. The room was sparse, just a laptop, some basic supplies, and her notebooks. Nothing that couldn't be abandoned quickly. She listened to Cole's voice again. Something about youth assessments. Then Whitaker cutting him off. Ward 9 was dissolved years ago. Kai's eyes narrowed as she made notes in her journal. The way Whitaker had interrupted, his immediate shutdown of the conversation, it confirmed what she'd suspected. They remembered Ward 9. They had been part of it. So you do remember, she whispered, closing her notebook. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance as storm clouds gathered over the city. The plain manila envelope sat unopened on Trina's desk for several minutes while she stared at it, heart racing. No return address, no markings, just her name typed in basic font. She'd found it slipped under her office door that morning. With trembling fingers, she finally opened it. Inside was a single black USB drive, unmarked except for a small piece of tape with TR written in precise handwriting. Trina glanced around her empty office before plugging it into her laptop. A folder opened automatically, revealing dozens of files with clinical names. W9 Personnel 1998 to 2006.pdf. Subject Assessments Group A.xlsx. Training Documentation Series 3.mp4. Her breath caught as she began opening them. The personnel roster listed names, positions, and clearance levels for something called Ward 9 Behavioral Modification Program. She recognized some names: local police officers, child services workers, even a few politicians. But it was the subject files that made her blood run cold. Young girls, all between ages 6 to 12, most African American, labeled with coded designations instead of names. Medical records, psychological evaluations, training assessments. And there, under primary assets, was a familiar face. Kai, age 8, designation W9A7. Oh God, Trina whispered, covering her mouth. She clicked on one of the video files. The footage showed a stark white training room. In the center, a small figure in gray sweats, young Kai, faced off against an adult instructor. The man towered over her, but Kai's stance was perfectly balanced, her expression focused. What followed wasn't a fight, it was a demonstration. Every movement precise, controlled, almost beautiful in its efficiency. The instructor attacked, Kai evaded. He pressed forward, she redirected. No wasted energy, no hesitation. Just pure tactical response drilled to perfection. A second clip showed similar training, but now Kai worked with another girl her age. They moved in sync, anticipating each other's actions. The file name labeled them as Asset Team Alpha, W9-A7 and W9-A12. Trina's phone rang, making her jump. An unknown number flashed on the screen. Her hand shook as she answered. Hello? Ms. Ross. The voice was young but steady, controlled. I see you received the files. Trina's heart stopped. Kai? Yes, we need to talk. In person. They agreed to meet at Jefferson Park, busy enough to be safe, open enough to spot surveillance. Trina found Kai sitting at a chess table, dressed casually in jeans and a light jacket. If you didn't know to look for her, she'd be invisible among the lunch crowd. Thank you for coming, Kai said as Trina sat down. Her voice was soft but clear, her posture alert but not tense. The files, Trina began. Those training videos, what they did to you children, was illegal, inhumane, but also incomplete. Kai's dark eyes met Trina's. There are 2 more of us still trapped in the system, Maya and Zana. She explained about Maya at the shelter, her fractured mind and damaged memories. And Zana's being held at Riverside Group Home. They keep her medicated, labeled as unstable. She was my training partner, W9A12 in those videos. Let me help, Trina said immediately. I have access, credentials. We can... That's why I contacted you. Kai nodded. I need official cover to reach them. But you have to understand the risk. These people, they erase problems. Permanently. Miles away at Riverside Group Home, Zana sat in the common room, staring at the institutional green walls. Her long braids were neat, her clothes clean. She looked like any other troubled teen, except for her eyes. They held something harder, more focused than simple teenage rebellion. "Time for meds, Zana," a staff member called cheerfully, approaching with a paper cup of pills. Zana didn't respond. For 3 days now, she'd been palming the medications, hiding them in tissue paper, flushing them later. Her mind was clearing for the first time in months. "I saw her," she whispered, more to herself than anyone. "Kai got out. She's coming." The staff member sighed, marking something on her clipboard. "Now, Zana, we've talked about these fantasies. Kai isn't real. She's just part of your delusions." But Zana knew better. She'd seen the news footage of the police confrontation. She recognized those movements, that precise efficiency. Only Ward 9 training looked like that. Back at the park, Kai and Trina planned their approach. "We'll pose as state evaluators," Kai explained, showing Trina some forged credentials. "Standard assessment visit. No one questions extra paperwork in group homes. And once we're in, I need 10 minutes with Zana to wake her up, remind her who she is." Kai's expression hardened slightly. They've kept her drugged to suppress her training, her memories. But it's still there, just buried. Across town in his private office, Sergeant Whitaker sat at his computer, reviewing the same files Trina had just seen. His face was a mask of cold fury as he watched young Kai's training footage. The Ward 9 program had been perfect, taking troubled youth and reshaping them into assets, until the ethics investigation started, until bleeding hearts like Trina Ross started asking questions. They'd erased the records, relocated the subjects, buried everything under layers of bureaucracy and sealed files. How had these videos survived? Who had leaked them? Whitaker's jaw clenched as he watched Kai's fluid movements on screen. She'd been their star pupil, perfectly conditioned, completely controlled, until she wasn't. "We should have terminated her when we had the chance," he said quietly to the empty room. His finger hovered over the delete key, but he knew it was too late. The files were out there now. The truth was spreading. He picked up his phone and dialed a secure number. "Sir, we have a situation. Asset W9-A7 is active again. Yes, sir. Full containment protocol. Understood." The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawn of Riverside Group Home as Kai and Trina approached the front entrance. Both women wore professional attire, Trina in a navy blazer and slacks, Kai in a modest gray pantsuit that made her look older than her years. Their shoes clicked against the concrete path with measured confidence. Kai carried a leather portfolio filled with official-looking documents, while Trina held a tablet displaying their forged credentials. They had rehearsed their roles carefully. Trina as the senior evaluator, Kai as her assistant specializing in behavioral assessment. At the front desk, a tired-looking receptionist barely glanced at their IDs before buzzing them through. "Someone will be right with you," she droned, returning to her computer screen. Minutes later, the program director herself arrived. Dr. Sandra Chen, a slim woman in her 50s with reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She smiled warmly, though her eyes remained calculating. "We weren't expecting a state evaluation for another month," she said, leading them down a fluorescent-lit hallway. "Surprise visits are becoming standard procedure," Trina explained smoothly. "Helps us get a more accurate picture of daily operations." Dr. Chen nodded, though her shoulders tensed slightly. "Of course. Where would you like to begin?" "We'd like to observe some of the residents in their routine activities," Trina said. "I understand you have a therapeutic gardening program?" "Yes, several of our girls participate. It's quite beneficial for building focus and responsibility." They followed Dr. Chen through a set of double doors into a sunny courtyard. Several teenage girls worked in raised garden beds under the watchful eye of 2 staff members. And there, kneeling in the dirt pulling weeds, was Zana. Kai's breath caught slightly. The girl's long braids were pulled back neatly, her movements precise despite the sedative haze that clouded her dark eyes. She looked older than in the Ward 9 footage, but Kai would have known her anywhere. "I'd like to review your medication protocols," Trina said, drawing Dr. Chen and one staff member aside. She launched into a series of detailed questions about dosages and monitoring procedures. Taking advantage of the distraction, Kai moved casually toward the garden beds. She knelt down near Zana, pretending to make notes in her portfolio. The other girls barely glanced at her. Zana's hands stilled in the dirt. Her body went rigid, though she didn't look up. Kai waited, then slowly made the signal. 3 fingers brushed against her collar in a specific pattern, a gesture drilled into them years ago at Ward 9. For a long moment, Zana remained frozen. Then her right hand trembled as she returned the signal, exactly as they'd been taught. Her breathing had become shallow and quick. "May I join you?" Kai asked quietly, settling onto the wooden bench beside the garden bed. Zana gave a tiny nod, still not meeting her eyes. "I thought you were dead," Zana whispered, her voice barely audible. Her fingers worked mechanically in the soil. "They told me I imagined your escape, that you were never real. They've kept me so foggy with the pills." "I'm real," Kai murmured, "and I'm here to help you. I remember everything now." Zana's voice shook slightly. "The training, the tests, the other girls. I stopped taking the meds 3 days ago. But Kai..." Finally she looked up, her eyes wide with fear. "I don't know if I can leave. What if they catch us? What if they put me somewhere worse?" "They won't," Kai promised. "We have a plan. Just stay calm and..." "Excuse me?" A sharp voice cut through their whispered conversation. The second staff member was approaching, phone in hand. "Dr. Chen, there seems to be an issue with their credentials. The state office has no record of a scheduled evaluation today." Dr. Chen's head snapped up, her pleasant demeanor vanishing. "Security to the garden area," she spoke into her radio. "Now." But Trina was already moving. In one smooth motion, she pulled the fire alarm on the courtyard wall. Harsh bells began blaring throughout the building. "Everyone remain calm," Dr. Chen shouted over the noise. "This is likely a false alarm, but we need to follow evacuation procedures. Staff, please gather the residents and..." In the chaos of girls standing up and staff shouting instructions, Kai touched Zana's arm. "Now, side gate. Don't run." Moving with careful precision, they slipped away from the group as staff tried to organize an orderly evacuation. The side gate was unlocked. Kai had checked earlier. They passed through it just as voices began calling out behind them. A yellow cab was waiting exactly where Kai had arranged. They slid into the back seat, and the driver pulled away without a word, turning smoothly onto the main road. Inside the group home, alarms still blaring, Dr. Chen grabbed her phone with trembling fingers. She dialed a number from memory. "Sir, we've lost another one." Zana sat rigid in the cab's back seat, her hands clenched in her lap. But as they turned onto the highway, leaving Riverside Group Home behind, some of the tension began to ease from her shoulders. She looked at Kai, a spark of her old determination flickering in her eyes. "Where are we going?" she asked softly. "Somewhere safe," Kai answered. "We have work to do." The cab merged into traffic, becoming just another vehicle in the morning rush hour. Behind them, emergency vehicles were already arriving at Riverside, their lights flashing uselessly in the bright morning sun. The evening sun had faded to a dim purple glow through Trina's apartment windows. 3 cups of tea sat cooling on the coffee table, surrounded by scattered papers and photos, evidence of lives disrupted and stories untold. Kai sat cross-legged on the floor, her back against the couch, fingers methodically arranging documents in precise stacks. Meanwhile, Zana perched stiffly in an armchair, her shoulders tense and eyes alert. The medication was slowly wearing off, bringing clarity but also tension to her movements, the slight tremor in her hands betraying years of chemical restraint. Trina settled onto the couch with a notepad, her social worker's instincts taking over. The familiar weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders as she clicked her pen. "Take your time," she said gently, her voice warm with practiced compassion. "Tell us what you remember." Zana's fingers traced patterns on the armrest, a nervous habit from years of confined routine. The fabric beneath her fingertips had worn thin from her repetitive movements. "It wasn't just training," she began, her voice low but steady, carrying the weight of buried memories. "They had a system, a language. Everything meant something else." She closed her eyes, remembering. The morning bell was reset. Meals were fuel protocol. We weren't girls or children, we were assets or units. They stripped away everything human about us, piece by piece, until we forgot who we were before. Kai nodded slightly, recognition flickering across her usually stoic features. She remembered those terms, that calculated erasure of identity, the systematic dismantling of self that had been their daily existence. "The drills never stopped," Zana continued, her words gaining momentum like water breaking through a dam. "Combat training, evasion scenarios, memory exercises. But the worst were the psychological controls. They'd wake us at random hours, move us to different rooms, change our names. You never knew what was real and what was just another test." Her hands trembled slightly as she wrapped them around her untouched teacup. Some girls tried to resist. Maya was one. She'd refuse commands, try to keep her real name. That's when they started marking files NTR. "No trace required," Kai translated quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Trina's pen moved quickly across her notepad, capturing every word, every detail that might help build their case. "What happened to the NTR girls?" she asked, though part of her already dreaded the answer. "They disappeared. Transfer orders would come but no destination listed. Just federal reassignment." Zana's voice hardened, brittle with suppressed rage. "We never saw them again. They vanished like they never existed." Kai reached for her backpack and pulled out a folded map, spreading it across the coffee table. Red pins marked locations across several states, places where the 27 missing girls had been taken from their homes or foster placements. The pattern was too deliberate to be coincidence. "This is everything I've documented so far," Kai explained, her finger tracing invisible connections between the points. Ward 9 was the main facility, but there had to be other sites, places they moved girls after the program supposedly shut down. Zana leaned forward, studying the map. Her eyes narrowed as she traced invisible lines between the pins, her training kicking in despite years of forced sedation. "There," she said suddenly, pointing to a spot in rural Georgia with unexpected certainty. "Site Echo. It's where they took me after Ward 9 closed. Another training facility, disguised as a juvenile treatment center." Kai handed her a red pin. Zana placed it precisely on the location, her hand steady now, driven by purpose. They kept operating, just more hidden, more careful. Maya was there too, before they broke her down completely. Trina had moved to her laptop, creating folders and subfolders with methodical efficiency. The blue light of the screen reflected in her determined eyes. "We need to organize everything," she said. "Every name, every date, every transfer record we can find. Build a timeline that no one can dismiss or explain away." She began typing rapidly, years of case management experience flowing into clear, devastating documentation. Medical records, facility logs, staff rosters, anything that proves the pattern. We'll back it all up on a secure server plus a hard drive in a safety deposit box. No single point of failure. They can't erase it all. "The anniversary of the first disappearance is in 1 week," Kai noted, her finger resting on a faded newspaper clipping. Jasmine Taylor, she was 12. Her voice carried a weight of responsibility, of memory. Someone had to remember these girls. "That's our deadline then," Trina said, determination hardening her usually gentle features. "We prepare everything for a mass leak, media outlets, advocacy groups, oversight committees. Hit them from all sides at once, make it impossible to cover up again." Zana stood abruptly and walked to the window. The street below was quiet, but her posture was alert, wary. Years of enforced medication hadn't dulled her trained instincts. If anything, they'd sharpened with the need to survive. "They're not going to let us leak anything," she said softly, eyes scanning the darkened buildings across the street. "They're watching her again, just like they always do." In the shadows between two buildings, a small drone hovered silently. Its red light blinked steadily, lens focused on Trina's apartment windows, recording every movement, every shadow. The three women stood in tense silence, knowing their window of opportunity was closing fast. But in their shared gaze was determination, not fear. They had been trained to disappear. Now they would use those same skills to become impossible to ignore. The drone's light continued to blink in the darkness, recording, waiting. But it couldn't see the strength of purpose that filled the small apartment, the power of truth finally rising to light after decades of darkness. The morning sun cast long shadows through the Venetian blinds of the police headquarters conference room. Sergeant Whitaker sat at a polished oak table, his posture rigid and professional. Across from him, a man in an expensive charcoal suit adjusted his gold cufflinks. The door was closed, and a small electronic device on the table emitted a low hum, a signal jammer ensuring complete privacy. "The situation has become more complicated, Mr. Harrison," Whitaker said, sliding a manila folder across the table. "Our Ward 9 asset has made contact with a social worker. They're gathering documentation." Harrison opened the folder, his manicured fingers moving methodically through surveillance photos of Kai, Trina, and Zaina. His expression remained neutral, but his jaw tightened slightly. "The private sector invested considerable resources in the Ward 9 program," Harrison said, his voice measured and cold. "My clients were assured all loose ends were contained. This represents a significant liability." Whitaker leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. "I understand the stakes, but we need to handle this carefully. Direct intervention would only validate their claims." "What do you propose?" Harrison asked, closing the folder. "We don't need violence, we need discredit," Whitaker explained, a hint of satisfaction in his tone. "The social worker Trina Ross is our weak point. Destroy her credibility, and the whole investigation falls apart." Harrison nodded slowly, understanding. "And the girls?" "Without an adult advocate, they're just troubled runaways making wild accusations. The system will handle them. Quietly, legally, and completely." The two men exchanged knowing looks. They had built careers on making problems disappear while keeping their hands clean. This would be no different. 3 hours later, a child services van pulled up outside Trina's apartment building, accompanied by 2 police cruisers. The late afternoon light cast harsh shadows as 6 officials approached the entrance, 4 social workers and 2 officers, all carrying the weight of authority in their stern expressions. They had a court order, hastily approved based on an anonymous complaint about Trina's mental state and allegations of harboring endangered minors. The paperwork was perfect. Every protocol followed to the letter. It was the system working exactly as Whitaker had designed it to. The team moved efficiently up the stairs, their footsteps echoing in the narrow hallway. But when they burst through Trina's door, they found the apartment empty. The rooms still held traces of recent occupation, a half-empty cup of tea, a warm laptop, scattered papers. But Kai and Zana were gone, having recognized the signs of surveillance hours earlier. Trina, however, was just returning from the corner store. She walked into the ambush with a bag of groceries in her arms. "Ms. Ross," the lead social worker said, holding up a badge, "we're here concerning reports of your recent erratic behavior and unauthorized contact with minor children." Trina's face remained calm, but her heart raced. She had known this might happen. It was why they had prepared protocols, backup plans, secure channels. She didn't resist when they took her arms. "This is for your own good," one of the social workers said, producing a syringe. "Just a mild sedative to help you stay calm during your evaluation." The needle slid into her arm. As the medication took hold, Trina watched them confiscate her phone, her laptop, her files. Through increasingly foggy vision, she saw them accessing her devices, beginning the systematic erasure of her digital life. "All standard procedure," someone was saying, but their voice seemed far away. "We'll take good care of you, Ms. Ross." They led her down to the waiting van, her steps becoming unsteady. Her last clear thought was of the secure backup drive, safely hidden away where they would never find it. In a dimly lit motel room across town, Kai sat cross-legged on a worn carpet, her burner phone displaying a new message. It had come from Trina's secure number, a number they had set up specifically for emergencies, using an encryption protocol that Kai had designed herself. The message was brief, written in their prearranged code. False house. No fire. I'm tagged. Kai's expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened around the phone. They took her offline, she whispered. Zana moved from her lookout position by the window, her movements silent despite her agitation. They had both known this was coming, had prepared for it since spotting the surveillance drone. Everything of importance had already been moved, their electronic footprints erased, their tracks covered. Without speaking, they began their practice disappearing act. Kai methodically destroyed the burner phone while Zana gathered their minimal belongings. They had 3 backup locations prepared, none of them traceable to either girl. Their movements were precise, efficient, exactly as they had been trained, but now used for their own survival rather than their handlers' purposes. Within minutes, the room was clear of any evidence they had ever been there. Zana shouldered her backpack, her face set in determined lines. They had already memorized their next moves, their contingency plans, their emergency protocols. No words were needed as they slipped out the back exit and vanished into the gathering dusk. Behind them, the motel room stood empty, holding no secrets, telling no tales. Just as they had been taught. But this time, disappearing was their choice, their power, their path to eventually being seen. The evening shadows stretched long across St. Elmo Shelter's brick walls as Kai and Zana approached through the back alley. They had timed their arrival perfectly. Shift change meant minimal staff presence and maximum confusion. Maya would be in the recreation room, following her strictly scheduled routine. Kai adjusted her volunteer badge, another perfect forgery, while Zana kept watch. The back door's electronic lock yielded easily to Kai's modified keycard, a trick she'd learned years ago. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed overhead as they navigated the familiar institutional corridors. Maya sat alone at a table, methodically arranging colored blocks in patterns only she understood. Her movements were slow, dulled by years of heavy medication, but her eyes showed a flash of recognition when Kai approached. Zana positioned herself near the door, watching for staff. Maya, Kai said softly, sitting across from her. We need your help. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she placed another block. They said, "You weren't real," she whispered, her voice scratchy from disuse. They lied, Kai replied, keeping her voice gentle but firm, just like they lied about everything else. But we're getting out, all of us. From her pocket, Kai produced a small notebook. Inside were precise instructions, written in the same command format they'd all learned at Ward 9. Maya's eyes focused on the familiar structure, action items, timing marks, contingencies. Her fingers traced the lines as muscle memory began to override medication. Can you still follow a sequence? Kai asked. Maya nodded slowly, her movements becoming more deliberate. Always, remember, the patterns. Zana approached quietly, placing a burner phone on the table. We need to create a false trail, she explained. Make them chase shadows while we move. For the next hour, they worked methodically. Maya helped them create a digital breadcrumb trail, social media check-ins, ATM withdrawals, security camera appearances, all leading to a downtown motel. Every detail was calculated to appear authentic while being completely false. Remember, Kai told Maya as they finished, stay in your routine until we signal, then follow the exit plan exactly. Maya's eyes were clearer now, focused on the mission. Some part of her training remained intact beneath the medication's fog. She tucked the instructions into her sleeve and resumed arranging blocks as if nothing had changed. Across town, Detective Cole stared at his computer screen, tracking the girls' apparent movements. The pattern looked right. 3 teenagers moving predictably through the city, making amateur mistakes, leaving traces. It was exactly what he expected to see. Got them, he announced to the tactical team. Downtown Heritage Motel, room 214. Police units converged on the location, their lights off, moving with practiced precision. They surrounded the two-story building, thermal cameras showing a heat signature in the target room. SWAT teams took position, but Kai and Zana were already elsewhere, approaching the private clinic where Trina was being held. The building's security was good, but they had been trained to be better. They moved through blind spots in the camera coverage, timing their movements between guard rotations. The service entrance yielded to another modified key card. Inside, they navigated sterile hallways using memorized blueprints. Their footsteps were silent on the polished floors, a skill drilled into them until it became instinct. They found Trina in a private room on the 3rd floor, strapped to a bed with an IV drip keeping her sedated. Her face was pale, but her breathing was steady. Zana stood guard while Kai quickly disconnected the IV line. "Come on, Trina," Kai whispered, breaking an ammonia capsule under her nose. "Wake up." Trina's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first. Recognition slowly dawned through the chemical haze. "Kai?" she mumbled. "How?" "No time," Kai said, already working on the restraints. "Can you walk?" Trina nodded weakly. With Zana's help, they got her to her feet. She swayed but remained upright, fighting through the sedation's effects. They moved carefully through the halls, supporting Trina between them. The night shift was minimal, and those few staff they encountered barely glanced at them. 3 figures in stolen scrubs looked ordinary enough. As they passed a records room, Zana's sharp eyes caught something. "Wait," she whispered, slipping inside. Moments later, she emerged with a thin file folder labeled Project W10, Candidate Review, Maya D. "Evidence," she said simply, tucking it into her coat. They reached the staff exit without incident. Outside, cool night air helped clear Trina's head. She was steadier now, though still requiring support. "Maya?" she asked as they helped her into a waiting car. "Safe," Kai assured her. "We have a place." The car pulled away smoothly, leaving no trace of their presence. Behind them, the clinic stood quiet, unaware of what had just occurred. It would be hours before anyone discovered Trina's empty room. Across town, the SWAT team breached the motel room, finding only an active burner phone on a made bed. On its screen, a single message blinked. "Better luck next time." The car wound through back streets toward their temporary safe house. Maya was already there, having followed her extraction plan perfectly. She sat at a table, arranging small objects in familiar patterns, her eyes clear and focused for the first time in years. Trina sank into a chair, the last of the sedation wearing off. She looked at the 3 girls, Kai's quiet strength, Zana's fierce protectiveness, Maya's awakening awareness. In 4 days, their evidence would reach the public. But for now, they simply existed together in the safety of shadows. In the safe house basement, a single bare bulb cast harsh shadows across the concrete walls. The air was thick with dust and tension as Zana, Kai, and Maya huddled around a metal folding table. Between them lay the stolen file, its manila cover marked with stark black text. Project W10, Candidate Review, Maya D. Kai's hands were steady as she opened the file, but her jaw tightened at what she found inside. Page after page of clinical observations, written in cold, detached language that reduced Maya to nothing more than a test subject. The dates tracked backwards through years of Maya's life at various facilities. Subject continues to display high resistance to initial programming phases, Zana read aloud, her voice tight with anger. Long-term sedation protocols implemented to reduce cognitive function and memory retention. Maya's fingers traced the words on the page, her movements jerky and uncertain. The medication was still working its way out of her system, but her eyes were clearer than they had been in years. Zana flipped to another page, her expression darkening. Recommendation: proceed with closure protocol testing on subject Maya D. Previous memory suppression techniques proved insufficient. New methodology required. She looked up at Kai and Maya, her face grim. W10 isn't just a continuation of what they did to us at Ward 9. It's the upgrade. They don't want memory survivors anymore. They want blank tools, completely reprogrammable. Maya's hands began to shake. She knocked over a cup of water, but nobody moved to clean it up. The water spread across the concrete floor like a growing stain. Kai studied the documentation methodically, her training allowing her to process the horror with clinical distance. But as she read deeper into the files, something clicked into place. "Maya," she said softly, "you were meant to be their first W10 prototype. Your memory loss, it wasn't a side effect of their experiments. It was their goal." Maya's face crumpled. She pressed her palms against her eyes, shoulders hunching as if trying to make herself smaller. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I forgot everything. I tried to remember, but it was like trying to hold on to smoke." "No," Kai said firmly, reaching across the table to grip Maya's wrist. "Don't apologize. You're still here. You're still you. That means they lost." Maya lowered her hands, revealing tears streaming down her face. But there was something else in her expression now, a spark of defiance breaking through the shame. From the corner, Trina watched the scene unfold. She was still pale from the sedatives, wrapped in a blanket someone had found, but her mind was clearing. She pushed herself up from her chair, moving slowly to join them at the table. "We need to shift our strategy," she said, her voice hoarse but determined. "I've been thinking about it. The story we were going to tell, about missing girls and corrupt officials. It's not enough anymore." Kai looked up from the files. "What do you mean?" "The story isn't just about missing girls anymore," Trina explained, lowering herself carefully into a chair. "It's about what they became, what they tried to make you become, and what they're still trying to do with programs like W10. She gestured to Maya. "Your story, all of your stories, they're not just about disappearance, they're about survival, about keeping your humanity when they tried to erase it." Zana nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. "We show everything, the training, the programming, the drugs. Make them see what really happened behind those walls." "And what's still happening," Kai added quietly, looking at the W10 file. For the next hour, they worked together, reorganizing their evidence. Maya helped sort through old training footage, her hands steady now as she arranged the files in perfect chronological order, her organizational training emerging through the fog of medication. Zana compiled medical records and facility documentation, building a paper trail of systematic abuse. Trina added her own records of the missing girls, connecting official disappearances to Ward 9 intake dates. Finally, Kai turned to her laptop. Lines of code reflected in her glasses as she rebuilt their leak site from scratch, using every security measure and encryption protocol she'd ever learned. They named it Code Kai, a small act of defiance, reclaiming her name from those who had tried to erase it. She set up the timer carefully, scheduling the upload for midnight 3 days from now. The date wasn't random. It would coincide with the city's annual youth memorial event, when politicians and community leaders gathered to make speeches about protecting children. Their hypocrisy would be exposed at the moment of maximum visibility. The basement was quiet except for the soft click of keys and the hum of the laptop's fan. On the screen, the upload countdown began. 72 hours. Maya stared at the numbers, her fingers moving in familiar patterns on the table surface. 3 days, she whispered. "Will we be ready?" "We have to be," Zana replied, gathering the scattered papers into careful piles. "They've had years to perfect their lies. We only get one chance to tell the truth." Kai said nothing, but her fingers moved faster across the keyboard, triple-checking every security measure, every backup plan. The timer continued its steady count. 71, 59, 58. 71, 59, 57. The morning sun filtered through dusty blinds in the safe house as Trina's phone buzzed. She checked the display, a number she hadn't seen in days. Liam. Her heart quickened as she answered. "Trina?" Liam's voice was hushed, urgent. "Are you somewhere safe to talk?" "Yes," she replied, moving to a corner of the room where the others couldn't hear. "What's happening?" "Listen carefully. The city's hosting their annual Community Youth Legacy Summit in 2 days. Every news outlet will be there. Politicians, community leaders, child advocacy groups, all of them." He paused, papers rustling in the background. They're live streaming the whole thing. Public access, multiple platforms. Trina's mind raced with the possibilities. Untouchable, she whispered. Exactly. Once it's live, they can't shut it down without drawing more attention. And I've got something else. I managed to get you on the speakers list. Used your old credentials, cited your years of youth advocacy work. Kai looked up from her laptop, noticing Trina's changed expression. Zana and Maya also sensed the shift in energy, moving closer. Hold on, Trina said to Liam. She put the phone on speaker and placed it on the table. Tell them what you just told me. As Liam explained the summit details, Kai's usually stoic expression showed a glimmer of satisfaction. This was better than their midnight data dump plan. This was visibility they couldn't erase. How many people usually attend these summits? Zana asked, leaning toward the phone. Hundreds in person, Liam replied. Thousands more watching online. Every local news station covers it. They make a big show about youth protection and community investment. Maya, who had been quietly drawing patterns on a notepad, looked up. Perfect time to show them what real youth protection looks like, she said softly. They spent the next hour developing their new strategy. Trina would be their public face, using her position and reputation to command attention. Her years of documentation would give weight to their revelations. She would speak as herself. No hiding, no code names. I'll need to revise the presentation, Kai said, fingers already moving across her keyboard. Break it into segments. Visual evidence first, then documentation, then personal testimony. Zana paced the room, her nervous energy visible in every movement. This isn't just uploading files anymore, we're putting ourselves right in front of them. What if they try to stop us before we can finish? They can't, Trina said firmly. Not without causing a scene that would only draw more attention to what we're saying. The summit is their pride event. They won't risk disrupting it publicly. Maya had been unusually focused during the planning, her medication-induced fog continuing to lift. I want to help, she said, but I don't think I can speak there, not in person. Not yet. Kai turned to her. You don't have to. We can record your story beforehand. Let you tell it in your own words, your own way. It might be even more powerful that way. The idea energized Maya. She sat straighter, her hands steady as she began writing out what she wanted to say. Years of suppressed memories were surfacing, and this time, she was determined to give them voice. They worked through the logistics methodically. Kai would coordinate from a secure location, monitoring the live stream and managing their digital assets. Zana would handle distribution, ensuring flash drives containing their complete archive reached key media contacts during Trina's presentation. The timing has to be perfect, Kai explained, drawing a timeline on a whiteboard. We start with Trina's introduction, her credentials, her years of service. Then we show the pattern of disappearances. Once we have their attention, we reveal Ward 9, then W10, then Maya's testimony. Zana studied the timeline, her tactical training evident in her questions. What about security? Metal detectors? Badge checks? I can help with that, Liam's voice came through the phone. I've got access to the venue layout and security protocols. I'll send them encrypted. Trina began practicing her opening statement, her voice growing stronger with each rehearsal. She would need to be unshakable on that stage. My name is Trina Ross. For 15 years, I've worked to protect our city's most vulnerable children. Today, I'm here to tell you about the ones we failed, the ones we let disappear. Maya recorded her testimony in the safe house bathroom, where the acoustics were clearest. Her voice trembled at first, but as she spoke about Ward 9, about the endless medications, about the pieces of herself they tried to erase, she found a strength she didn't know she had. Kai edited the video carefully, preserving every pause, every emotion in Maya's words. This wasn't just evidence anymore. It was truth-telling, healing. We don't disappear anymore, Kai said quietly as they watched the final cut. They do. The words hung in the air, a promise and a warning wrapped together. For years, they had been erased. From records, from memories, from existence. Now they would step into the light on their own terms. Across town, in a sleek office building, Sergeant Whitaker's phone chimed with an urgent message. His contractor had infiltrated the summit's planning database. Attached was a screenshot of the speakers list, and there it was. Trina Ross, Youth Advocacy and Child Protection Services. Whitaker's face hardened as he recognized the name. He immediately opened his laptop, accessing restricted judicial contacts. Within minutes, he was drafting emergency orders. "I need a warrant," he spoke into his phone. "Priority processing, subject Trina Ross, charges, data theft and juvenile endangerment. We need this processed within 24 hours. He hung up and stared at Trina's name on his screen. The summit was in 48 hours. The warrant would be ready in 24. A simple equation. Find her, arrest her, discredit her before she could speak. What he didn't know was that, at that exact moment, Trina was helping Maya record the final words of her testimony. "My name is Maya D. I am not a project. I am not a prototype. I am a survivor. And I remember everything." The morning light filtered through the library's tall windows as Kai moved purposefully through the quiet aisles. She called this last mission prep, though it felt more like closing a circle. Her footsteps were silent on the worn carpet as she gathered what she needed: public records, old newspapers, anything that could fill the final gaps in their presentation. After an hour of methodical research, she packed her bag and headed to the familiar street where she used to watch Detective Cole. The neighborhood hadn't changed. Same coffee shop where he bought his morning brew. Same newspaper stand where he'd paused to check headlines. She knew his schedule by heart now, could predict his movements down to the minute. Kai approached his mailbox with practiced casualness, just another teenager walking down the street. The envelope in her hand felt heavy despite containing only 2 pieces of paper. She'd written, "Do you remember Ward 9?" in clean, precise letters on the front. Inside was the document that had haunted her for years, Cole's signature on her Ward 9 admission papers, dated 8 years ago. Next to it, she placed a photo of herself at age 6, taken just days before they took her. Her eyes in the picture were already watchful, as if she sensed what was coming. The post-it note was the last piece. She'd written and rewritten the message several times before settling on the simplest truth. "You signed me away. What do you remember?" She slipped the envelope through the slot and walked away without looking back. Across town, Cole sat at his desk staring at the contents of the envelope with trembling hands. The signature was unmistakably his. The same loop in the C, the same slant he'd always used. But he had no memory of signing this girl's life away. The photo stared back at him, accusing in its innocence. He found Whitaker in his office, typing reports with his usual methodical precision. Cole slammed the documents on his desk. "You manipulated me." Cole's voice was low, dangerous. "You had me signing intake forms without telling me what they were for." Whitaker barely glanced at the papers. "Sit down, Cole. You're getting emotional about ancient history." "Ancient history, that's what you call destroying children's lives." "We were saving them." Whitaker's voice remained calm, reasonable. "These were troubled youth, heading for disaster. The agency made the decisions. We simply facilitated their transfer to a program designed to help them." "Help them?" Cole's laugh was bitter. "By erasing them? By experimenting on them? You're letting conspiracy theories cloud your judgment." Whitaker stood, straightening his tie. "Everything was done through proper channels. If you're having doubts about your role, that's your conscience playing tricks. We did good work." Cole stared at his former mentor, seeing him clearly for the first time. "You're a monster," he whispered. "No," Whitaker smiled thinly. "I'm a realist. Now I suggest you drop this line of inquiry. For your own good." Back at the safe house, Maya sat in front of the camera they'd set up in the small bathroom. The acoustics were better there, and the plain white wall made a perfect backdrop. She twisted her hands in her lap, then took a deep breath. "My name..." She paused, swallowed hard. "My name is Maya D. At least, that's what they let me keep. I don't remember my full name anymore. They took it, along with everything else. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. Do you know what it's like to forget your own name? Not gradually, like something slipping away, but to have it stolen? To wake up one day and realize someone reached inside your head and took pieces of you on purpose. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. They said the medications were to help me, to make me better. Better than what? Better than myself? Better than the girl who used to know her mother's face, her father's voice? I don't remember them anymore. But I remember the white rooms, the tests, the way they'd smile and say, progress, when another memory disappeared. In the main room, Zana and Kai worked on preparing the flash drives. Each one contained their complete archive, training footage, medical records, psychological evaluations, and Maya's testimony. Zana's hands shook slightly as she copied the files. What if we do this and nothing changes? She whispered, voicing her deepest fear. What if people just look away, like they always do? Kai paused in her work, considering the question. We're not here to change everything, she said finally. Just enough to be seen, to make sure the next girl they try to erase has a chance to be found. Zana nodded, understanding. They weren't seeking revolution, just recognition, the right to exist in memory. Outside, a black SUV crawled past their building. Inside, men with cameras zoomed in on windows, doors, any sign of movement. But the safe house remained still, empty. The girls had already moved on, traveling separately to the summit venue under carefully constructed aliases. Maya was now Sarah Chen, a student journalist working on the event. Zana became Rachel Martinez, part of the technical crew. Kai transformed into Amy Park, a volunteer coordinator's assistant. Each identity was backed by proper credentials, each story practiced until it felt natural. They left behind no traces, no clues to follow. The safe house that had sheltered them would hold only silence for those who came looking. Their real story would be told tomorrow, on a stage they had chosen, in voices that refused to be erased again. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cultural center's plaza as crews bustled around the auditorium entrance. News vans lined the curb, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like mechanical flowers. Inside, the grand space hummed with activity. Technicians checking microphones, staff arranging chairs, security personnel walking their routes with practiced efficiency. On a hidden server miles away, a digital counter ticked down with mechanical precision. Upload initiation 143710, 1437-9, 1437-08. The summit's banner hung above the stage. Building tomorrow's youth today, a community legacy. Below it, local officials gathered in small clusters, their voices a low murmur of practiced speeches and careful politics. A city councilwoman adjusted her blazer, reviewing note cards. The police commissioner straightened his tie, rehearsing sound bites about youth outreach and community trust. None of them noticed the 3 separate livestream feeds being established, or the subtle modifications to the venue's digital infrastructure that had been implemented over the past week. They didn't see the extra router hidden behind a curtain, or the secondary broadcast channel quietly waiting for activation. 5 blocks away, in a weathered white van with faded commercial lettering, Kai and Zana sat surrounded by monitors. The screens showed multiple views of the auditorium, main entrance, backstage, audience seating, and the primary feed that would soon go live to thousands of viewers. Zana's fingers moved steadily over a keyboard, running final checks on their system's integrity. Feed 3 is stable, she murmured, eyes fixed on the scrolling data. Backup servers are primed. Kai nodded, watching the main entrance feed. Her expression remained neutral, but her right hand tapped a steady rhythm on her knee, a tell she'd never quite eliminated from her Ward 9 days. Maya's video? Loaded and verified, triple redundancy, just like we planned. The auditorium's side entrance opened, and a figure in a long coat and tinted glasses slipped inside. Trina had aged her appearance subtly. Gray streaks in her hair, different makeup, a slight stoop to her shoulders that made her seem older and less noticeable. She moved with careful purpose toward the green room, nodding to staff as if she belonged. Moments later, Kai's phone lit up with a text. "We're in." proceeding. Across town, Detective Cole sat at his kitchen table, the morning light falling across scattered papers. The Ward 9 intake form lay before him, Kai's photo beside it. He'd been staring at his supposed signature for hours, something nagging at the edge of his consciousness. Now, comparing it to other documents from that period, he saw what had been hiding in plain sight. The signature was perfect, too perfect. His actual signatures from that time showed subtle variations, the natural inconsistencies of human handwriting. But this one was identical to a signature from a different form, down to the smallest detail. A forgery copied from another document. He hadn't signed this girl away. Someone had used his name, his authority, to make it look legitimate. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He hadn't been complicit. He'd been used. They all had. With trembling fingers, he pulled out his phone and dialed the backup number Trina had given him weeks ago, when she'd first started asking questions about old cases. She answered on the second ring. "You're not wrong," he said without preamble. "And they're still lying to both of us." In the green room, Trina's eyes widened. She looked down at her prepared notes, then back at her phone. "What do you mean?" "The signature, it's forged. I never signed those Ward 9 papers. Someone copied my signature to make it look official. They used me to legitimize what they were doing." Trina's hand tightened on her phone. Outside, she could hear the audience beginning to file in. The event would start soon. Everything they'd planned, everything they'd prepared to reveal, had just gained another layer of deception to expose. In the van, Kai watched the minutes tick down. Her finger hovered over the final upload command. One click that would send their entire archive streaming into the world. Years of hidden files, buried truths, and stolen lives would burst into public view all at once. The auditorium was nearly full now. The officials had taken their seats on stage. The cameras were rolling, their red lights steady and unwavering. In less than 15 minutes, everything would change. Not just for them, but for everyone who had ever looked away. Everyone who had helped build the walls of silence around Ward 9 and its victims. Zana reached over and squeezed Kai's free hand. No words were needed. They'd fought their way here together, each carrying their own scars, their own memories of white rooms and endless drills. Now they would fight their final battle not with fists or fear, but with truth. The countdown continued its relentless march toward zero. In the green room, Trina straightened her jacket and gathered her notes, Cole's revelation adding steel to her resolve. On a secure server, Maya's recorded testimony waited to tell its story to the world. And in a nondescript van, two girls who had refused to be erased, watched and waited for their moment to begin. The grand auditorium buzzed with anticipation as the Community Youth Legacy Summit began. Rows of well-dressed officials sat primly on stage, their practiced smiles gleaming under the bright lights. The police commissioner stepped to the podium first, his voice carrying through the speaker system with rehearsed authority. "Today we celebrate our commitment to youth mentorship," he declared, gesturing broadly. "Our programs create opportunities. Our centers build futures. This is our legacy." More speakers followed, each one offering polished variations on the same theme. A city councilwoman spoke about after-school programs. The education director highlighted improved graduation rates. Their words flowed smooth and controlled, carefully crafted to project success and stability. The audience nodded appreciatively, many taking notes on tablets and phones, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. In the green room, Trina took slow, measured breaths. She could hear the speeches through the wall, each practiced phrase making her grip her notes tighter. The weight of what she was about to do pressed against her chest, but her hands remained steady. Years of watching, documenting, and waiting had led to this moment. She glanced at her reflection one last time, barely recognizing herself. When her name was called, Trina walked onto the stage with quiet purpose. Her disguise was subtle but effective. The gray in her hair, the different makeup, the slightly altered posture. She approached the podium and adjusted the microphone, looking out at the sea of faces and cameras. Her heart pounded, but her resolve never wavered. "My name is Trina Ross," she began, her voice clear and unwavering. "I'm not here as a speaker. I'm here as a witness." A slight murmur rippled through the audience. On stage, several officials shifted uncomfortably, exchanging confused glances. The event coordinator frowned, checking her schedule. "You know the names of our youth centers," Trina continued, "but do you know the names of the girls we lost in them?" She lifted her notes and began to read. Jasmine Taylor, age 12, taken from Riverside Youth Center 2008, listed as federal transfer. Never seen again. Her mother still keeps her room exactly as she left it, waiting for a daughter who will never return. The large screen behind her flickered suddenly. In the van 5 blocks away, Kai's finger pressed the upload trigger. Documents began appearing on the display: intake forms, transfer records, medical evaluations. Her eyes narrowed with focus as years of collected evidence began streaming to the world. Maya Davidson, age 15. Trina's voice grew stronger. Chemically sedated for resistance to behavioral modification. Current status: memory compromised through experimental protocols. She can't remember her childhood, but she remembers the needles. More images filled the screen. Ward 9 blueprints, clinical photographs, psychological assessment logs. The audience's murmur grew louder as phones began lighting up throughout the auditorium. People started whispering, pointing at the screen in disbelief. Zana Mitchell, age 13, classified as high-potential asset, subjected to isolation training and forced medication, told her parents had abandoned her when they were actually fighting through courts to find her. In the press section, reporters were finding USB drives tucked into their press packets. As they plugged them in, their faces transformed from professional interest to shock. Phones started ringing. Laptops opened. The story was spreading. One journalist stood up, already dictating urgently into her phone. "And Kai," Trina said, her voice softening slightly. "Age 6 when they took her. Listed as prime candidate for advanced conditioning. A little girl who loved drawing butterflies, transformed into something else entirely." The screen changed again. Maya's recorded testimony began playing, her voice raw with emotion as she described the fog of forced forgetting, the pain of having her identity systematically erased. "They made me forget my own name," she whispered in the recording, "but they couldn't make me forget what they did." Security personnel started moving toward the stage, but they were too late. The live stream was active, broadcasting to thousands. Social media exploded with screenshots and clips. News alerts began popping up on phones across the city. Several audience members were already standing, filming everything with their phones. "Ward 9 wasn't a program," Trina declared, even as guards approached the podium. "It was an experiment in erasure. And when it failed, they created W10 to perfect their methods. Children weren't helped, they were harvested." More documents flashed across the screen. Financial trails linking government contracts to private facilities, medical records showing systematic drugging, training logs documenting the breakdown of young minds. The police commissioner was now on his feet, frantically signaling to security. In his office across town, Detective Cole watched it unfold on his monitor. The evidence was undeniable, including the forged signatures that had used his authority without his knowledge. His coffee cup slipped from his fingers, shattering on the floor. His phone rang. Internal Affairs. They wanted him in for an immediate hearing. His hand trembled as he reached for the receiver. Backstage, security finally reached Trina, but she had finished speaking. The truth was already out, spreading across networks and news feeds, impossible to contain. As they led her away, she saw Cole standing in the wings. Their eyes met briefly. He gave a single, quiet nod. Not forgiveness, not guilt. Just recognition of the truth they both now understood. A truth that would change everything. In the van, Kai and Zana watched multiple feeds of the chaos unfolding. Reporters were streaming out of the auditorium, phones pressed to their ears. Officials huddled in confused groups, their carefully prepared speeches forgotten. Social media counters showed the story spreading globally. Zana squeezed Kai's shoulder, a rare smile breaking across her face. Kai's eyes fixed on the upload status 000, upload complete. She leaned back in her chair, letting out a long breath. After years of hiding, running, and gathering evidence, they were finally seen. The truth was exposed, not in shadows or whispers, but in full public view. For the first time since she was 6 years old, she felt something close to peace. The screen before her showed Trina being escorted through the backstage area, her head held high. Maya's testimony continued playing on the main display, her quiet voice telling truths that could no longer be buried. And across every news channel, headlines were already appearing. Ward 9 government program accused of systematically targeting young girls. Breaking mass cover-up of youth behavioral modification program exposed. Live federal investigation demanded after youth summit revelations. The truth had finally broken free. They were no longer invisible, no longer erased. They were seen. 1 week after the summit, the nation was still reeling from the revelations. Headlines dominated every major news outlet, each day bringing new developments that sent shockwaves through corridors of power. The Washington Post's bold typeface declared, "Black Site Youth Program Exposed," while the New York Times ran with, "Private defense contractor under investigation for human testing." Cable news tickers continuously scrolled, "Senators demand inquiries into Ward 9 cover-up." In a stark federal building in Washington, Trina sat before a closed-door congressional panel. Her voice remained steady as she methodically presented evidence, explaining the pattern of disappearances and the systematic erasure of young lives. The senators leaned forward, their expressions grave as she detailed the psychological manipulation, the chemical controls, the deliberate fracturing of young minds. These weren't isolated incidents, she testified, her hands clasped firmly on the table. This was a coordinated program designed to exploit vulnerable children for experimental training purposes. Down the hall, in a different hearing room, Sergeant Whitaker faced his own reckoning. The subpoena had caught him off guard. He'd always assumed his connections would protect him. Now he sat rigid in his chair as investigators presented document after document, each piece of evidence further unraveling the web of deception he'd helped weave. Internal documents continued flooding news desks and social media. Training logs revealed the brutal conditioning methods. Financial records exposed the network of private contractors who had funded the program. Medical files detailed the chemical cocktails used to suppress memories and modify behavior. Each new revelation sparked fresh outrage, fresh investigations, fresh demands for accountability. The truth had gained unstoppable momentum. What had started as one leaked file had become an avalanche of evidence that no amount of institutional power could contain. At a small, unmarked house in a quiet neighborhood, Zana and Maya found a different kind of truth. The slow, gentle truth of healing. The trauma recovery home Trina had helped establish became their sanctuary, a place where they could finally begin processing years of buried pain. Maya spent hours in the sun-filled art room, her hands moving with increasing confidence across blank pages. Her sketches started as abstract swirls, the muscle memory of enforced patterns gradually giving way to more personal expressions. Colors began appearing in her work, first tentatively, then with growing boldness. "I remembered something today," she told Zana one morning, holding up a drawing of a small yellow house. "This was where I lived before, with my grandmother. The flowers in the garden were purple." Zana, sitting at her laptop working on college application essays, smiled. "That's good, Maya. The memories are coming back." She had her own ways of reclaiming herself. Online courses in psychology and social justice filled her screen. She was determined to understand what had been done to them, to transform her experience into knowledge that could help others. Her application essays spoke of resilience and transformation, of turning trauma into purpose. They stayed off the grid, avoiding social media and public appearances. Their names appeared in news reports, but they declined all interviews. This quiet life was its own form of victory. The freedom to simply exist, to heal, to build new routines not shaped by control or fear. Kai's absence was a constant undercurrent to their new reality. No one had seen her since the summit. Law enforcement agencies assumed she had fled the country, their surveillance networks coming up empty. Her digital footprint had vanished as completely as she had. But one morning, Trina found a plain manila envelope in her mailbox. No return address, no postmark, just her name in neat, precise handwriting she recognized immediately. Inside, she found 3 items. The first was a photograph worn at the edges but carefully preserved. It showed a young Kai, perhaps 6 or 7 years old, sitting on a porch swing. She was smiling, a real smile, not the blank expression they had trained into her. This was Kai before Ward 9, before the erasure began. The second item was a thumb drive, labeled simply, "In case they forget again." Trina knew without checking that it would contain backups of everything, all the evidence, all the records, all the proof needed to ensure the truth could never be buried again. The final item was a single note card. The message was brief but clear. "You helped me rewrite my code. Keep it safe." Trina held the photo carefully, studying the young girl's smile. She understood what Kai was telling her, that the truth needed guardians, people who would preserve it even after the headlines faded and public attention moved on. In a bright classroom across the country, morning sunlight streamed through tall windows. Students chatted quietly as they settled into their desks, the familiar rhythm of a new school year taking shape. The teacher stood at the front, calling roll with practiced efficiency. "Sarah Anderson, here. Marcus Chen, present. Catherine Bennett." A hand raised from the back row. "Here." The voice was clear, confident. She looked different now. Older, calmer, living under a new name. But her eyes remained the same, still sharp and observant, now carrying something new. Peace. Kai sat quietly at her desk, no longer hiding in shadows or calculating escape routes. She took notes in clean handwriting, asked questions during discussions, worked on group projects with her classmates. She was simply living, claiming the normal life that had been stolen from her so long ago. Her voice carried quiet strength as she spoke the truth she had fought so hard to prove. "They built me to disappear. I rebuilt myself to be seen." If you enjoyed the story of Kai, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.